Okay, so Dom, there's a saying in every newsroom, or at least I'd like to think there's a saying in every newsroom. It's basically there's no crying in journalism, but which is insane, I know. But after what's happened to this industry, the layoffs, the burnout, the trauma, I'm starting to wonder, was that really the healthiest motto to go by?
Jenna, do you really need to ask that question? Of course not. Of course not. But yeah, the truth is, journalists are the people who we run toward the tragedy. We're,
Yeah.
in many ways, the first responders to the car crashes, the crime scenes, the press conferences after a school shooting. It's like, while the rest of the world, and the thing is, after we cover the story and after the world moves on, we go right back to work.
Oh, we keep covering the story, especially if it's
Mhm.
something, ongoing. So today we're going to be asking the question that no one ever asks the people who bring you the news. How are we doing? Not good. Hi, I'm Jenna.
And I'm Dom. You know what's funny? Not long ago, we were both breaking news. Now we're
Breaking unemployment records.
exactly just like thousands of other journalists who've been laid off from newsrooms across the country.
Yeah, and after the shock wore off, we kept asking ourselves, what the hell do we do now?
And over many, many cups of coffee,
And maybe a few drinks.
we realized we had a unique opportunity here. Why not pull back the curtain on what's really happening in American media?
Right? I mean, we've spent years in this industry seeing how stories get made or don't, and now we can actually talk about it.
And trust me, there's a lot to talk about. From local news disappearing to social media reshaping journalism, we'll break it all down.
And look, we're not here to lecture anybody. We just want to help make sense of the information that we're getting and maybe have some much needed fun along the way.
So whether you're glued to the news, just trying to figure out what's real in your feed, or curious about the future of media, come hang with us.
Welcome to Laid Off and Looking, a podcast where two journalists
Are taking a critical look at American media. Jenna, the other day you sent me a survey, the one that was about like the emotional toll of covering the news. And you know, I, it was so interesting reading it because I associated with so much of it. But then I was just like, because I haven't been in a newsroom long in a while, it's like I felt a little disassociated from it.
Yeah, I know, but at the same time, that survey also made me realize how much of like this job that I had just sort of been ignoring. And I mean,
Hmm.
like the anxiety, the exhaustion, the sense of constantly being on, which all exacerbates the anxiety and the
Hmm.
exhaustion.
Hmm.
But when you're a reporter or you're a producer, or basically if you're working in a newsroom, the whole thing is just push through it. And it reminded me of when one of the many iterations when I was freelancing, and I had gotten sent out to day one of Sandy Hook. And when I say day one, I mean that's after the shooting happened. The families were just finding out that their babies were gone. And the entire world media descended on this teeny
Hmm.
tiny little town in Connecticut. That's a whole nother thing. But yeah, like I was so focused on getting facts and, like what the police reports were saying and which family was going to talk and make sure you get to the visual and like getting directions and all this other stuff. I was so fixated on those things that even though I was in an environment where the grief was so thick, you could cut it with a knife, I just compartmentalized all of it so that I could get out a clean, clear, factual story. The problem is, I just left it
Hmm.
stuffed away. I didn't go back to it until, of
Hmm.
course, we worked on the Uvalde story, and I pretty much had a meltdown in one of our meetings.
Yeah, but that's real though, because it's like we don't ever really sometimes have that moment, or we don't have the time because you work on one story and then you're right back to the next story. And you're like, I don't have time to like you compartmentalize things and you're just like, I'm going to push that aside and I'll deal with it at a later time. But we never deal with it at a later time.
No, we don't. That's the problem, is that it just sits there and it builds up and it builds up until, again, you have a news meeting and one of your journalists just completely comes unglued.
Yeah, but you know what? That was an important moment to acknowledge that, because I think that's what more newsrooms need. People acknowledging these are tough stories and we have to, and how do you're human beings too. And
Hmm.
we need to be able to deal with that aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can only imagine also for you because it's one thing obviously to be out in the field as a reporter, but also when you are a producer or a booker, you're calling and pressing people,
Yeah.
hopefully, to come on the air and talk about what, like the worst day of their life?
Yeah. And it's a weird feeling because you want to get the story, you want to get the guest, but you also realizing you're catching this person at probably the most vulnerable and the
Lowest.
hardest part of their ever that they're ever going to face in their lives. And you have to be like, for me, I've always been so empathetic in the sense of like, I don't really find, and maybe this is not the best thing for, you're talking about news booking. It's like, I sometimes like, if I don't get the story because the person, I'm not going to push. And some people push and know how to manipulate.
Oh,
It's,
yes, they do.
yeah. And that was never part of me. But every producer, every booker, every journalist who's been in that situation, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah. Well, that's why this new survey by Luisa Ortiz Perez is about the trauma, the hidden trauma of journalism. She's been researching how the digital era, online harassment, the constant layoffs, for God's sake, but it's created a generation of journalists who are, in a lot of ways, emotionally broken by the work.
And what I love about the work that Louisa is doing is she's not just collecting data, she's really creating solutions. So she's helping to launch the Media Resilience Network. It's a national support system that offers free mental health care for journalists and freelancers. Journalists have always faced tough stories, but lately the job itself has become a source of trauma, from layoffs and burnout to online harassment and the constant pressure to be always on. The toll isn't just emotional or mental, it's physical too.
Yeah, and our guest today has dedicated her work to changing or at least addressing that in a meaningful way. Dr. Luisa Ortiz Perez is the executive director and co-founder of Vita Activa, where she launched a global helpline for journalists and human rights defenders who are facing online harassment and trauma. And now she's launching the Media Resilience Network on February 14th of 26th, a new initiative that's going to offer counseling, peer support, and community care for journalists. Louisa, welcome to Laid Off and Looking.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit, at least from your perspective, of the origins of what you saw as a crisis, or what at least made you want to get a sense of the emotional toll that doing this kind of work was taking on journalists.
It is a very complicated question, and the answer is very, very simple.
Hmm.
I would say that um, initially, the biggest problem that journalists found was the arrival of technologies to apparently and for a while amplify the journalism space, the reach, and also the audiences that journalists were having access to. And I'm basically talking about social media. And this is
Mm.
not just me. It's Maria Ressa, Nobel Peace Prize of last year and founder of Rappler in the Philippines. I mean, Maria Ressa talks very clearly and defines very clearly the dissolution of freedom of expression, journalism freedom, this legitimate and law-abiding discourse, as well as civic infrastructure, to the way in which social media began accessing all paths of life. So what we found, and I'm talking about 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and today,
Hmm.
a lot of corporations started putting pressure on journalists to be online. You needed to be online to exist. You needed to be online to be present. You needed to have your face on everywhere so that people will understand,
Oh my
right?
God. Yeah,
Hmm.
no, I still struggle with that.
Well, and I think that
Ironically.
you
Hmm.
no, well, actually, no. It is actually your preservation instinct, and you should struggle because it wasn't right. And it never is right for a few reasons. I mean, and we're not going to talk about monetization and about the fact that it's not your face, but it's actually or it's your face in their money. But the emotional toll of being online and being surveilled and being looked at all the time generated legitimate danger. And that's how we realize that not only it's not okay, but in other parts of the world, people actually lose their lives. So it's less than okay.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I can think of numerous different ways in which I have tweaked my life to, like again, I want to be a present source, trustworthy source. And in the online space, part of what helps create that with an audience is a degree of vulnerability. But I did not sign up to be an influencer. I wanted to be a truth teller and a storyteller. And so, how to, I'm still learning how to, I guess, navigate what it is that I want to keep safe and what it is that I'm okay with sharing. And what on earth that has to do with like talking about, maybe a new piece of legislation
Hmm.
is actually the story. I'm still struggling with that. I'm not the story, but that's not how social media works.
But you are. But you are the story because you are the technology that is delivering that piece of news. And that is basically the center of my work and the center of the work of the two projects that I work on, which is Vita Activa and Modernet. Like journalism and journalists are technologies, embodied human made technologies that deliver stories to the world. We are not algorithms. We are not monetized um, Google ads, and we are not what the system has made us to be,
Hmm.
which is money generators. We are talking about the world, and as we speak, we're generating resources. Now, that's one thing. But on the other hand, we're also generated discursive clashes. We're generating hate. And the mere presence of the three of us right now on screen
Hmm.
will provoke opinions from anybody, from my aunts who will not appreciate the way I'm wearing my hair today, to some people who don't believe that we should be allowed to say what we want to say about the things that we want to talk about. Um, it's dangerous out there. We shouldn't be so comfortable putting our faces everywhere.
Dom, I know
It's
you have
yeah,
another. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I just have to
No,
throw this out there that
go-
as you were talking about your aunt, like I had so many unsolicited opinions about how I was wearing my hair when I was on camera that just reminded me just so deeply of like, oh my God, you're right. I've just come to normalize it because that's just part of the game.
and it's funny because I worked behind the camera. Like I was the producing and I was the one part of the behind the story. So this journey, as Jenna knows, is very different for me because actually, media companies, a lot of them, let's say earlier on in like 15, 20 years ago, really I didn't get the sense they wanted as many people on social media. It's changed over the past few years where they now it's like, how many followers do you have? If you want to go work for them, how many followers do you have? Like, what's your presence in social media? So that too has really shifted. But a question I have is about what about the independent journalists where you feel a pressure, like what we're doing right here? What else do? You have to put yourself out there. And I have to be real that I am uncomfortable with um, what reaction you get from the audience. You know what I mean? From the people watching you, feeling that negativity. I know some people will just say, when you talk to a lot of influencers, they'll be like, oh, you just get over it. I don't care. I find that hard to believe. I think everybody is impacted by negativity that we get online. And I think it does take a toll on us. And I feel like it's just very, how do you deal with that? How if you're an independent journalist trying to make it out there, putting your stories out there, that's enough of a big deal to be doing. Now you're also having to put yourself out there, having to deal one on one, and you don't have the protection of a big company. You don't have the protection of anybody, actually. You're kind of on your own.
Ah, it is not okay. And it's not, and that's again, if you're gonna take one thing of the conversation that the three of us are having today, dear listener, this is it. It is not okay. You don't shrug it. It doesn't leave your system. It is actually harm by 1,000 cuts. Shrugging at hate speech, shrugging at commentary about your body, shrugging at threats, shrugging at requests for some of us to go back to wherever country we were born in, etc., is a form of harassment and is a form of digital violence. And digital violence is real violence. Harassment is real. Harm is real. So, influencers and dear people who work very, very hard, walking the walk of the halls of, the digital, marketplace of ideas, are people who require much more care and much more community support than we all think, because it is impactful. Let me give you some statistics.
Mm-hmm.
6 in 10 journalists today claim that they are being harassed as we speak. 6 and 10. And most of them are people who are not Caucasian, people who are not cisgender, people who are not male presenting, people who are not in the main cities in this country. So everybody who is not mainstream, as whatever mainstream considers to be, is being harmed more. What kind of threats do we receive? If you happen to present female, you will receive extreme sexualized threats. It is hard. It goes fast.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very fast. If you are of a different, dissenting opinion, it will be death to you and your family. And there will be doxing. And I want to shout out to my really, really dear friend, Michelle Ferrier from Trustbusters. Michelle is case one in not only having to flee the place where she was reporting, change the city, change her name, change her address because of doxing. People shared her personal data online for her to become a target.
Oh
So,
my God.
what happens in the body? Second point, diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety, sleep deprivation, extreme weight loss or extreme weight gain, as well as all sorts of, and I'm not gonna go there, but all sorts of cancers and tumors and growths in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are connected to the stress and the anxiety. So please, planet, don't come tell us that us as journalists are not carrying physically the brunt of the hate that supposedly truth instills. And that's
Louisa,
it. Mm.
Louisa, a lot of journalists stay quiet, about what they're going through until they break. I mean, I know a lot of people, I've seen this happen where people just don't talk about it because they assume this is, once you do, you think, well, if you're working someplace, you think people think I'm weak. You know what I mean? Like, so you just keep it in. And this is part of the job. This is what I do. I mean, what have you noticed in terms of the research you've done? What kind of things did you start to hear once people opened up about that?
I have to tell you one thing. I adore this new generation. There's nothing, nothing that I cannot love more than the new generation of journalists who are coming up and are saying, I value my mental health,
Mhm.
I value my rest, and I value my training as a professional, not as a human punching bag. So we were trained to be quiet. We were trained to consider that sexual harassment was part of the job. We were trained to consider that being
Mm.
underpaid was okay.
Mhm.
We slept under desks, we ate
Oh my
trash,
God.
we carried people's
Yes.
bags, we
Yes.
published stuff without our bylines, and we were working as interns without pay for years.
Not to mention being screamed at in a newsroom. I mean, belittled and dehumanized in a newsroom over, and don't get me wrong, I understand a mistake,
Mistakes.
especially if it gets broadcast, is a problem. But I've been in newsrooms where the aftermath of
Mhm.
that mistake leaves everybody shook.
Oh, it's the piñata of feedback. You'll receive your feedback as being
Yeah.
a piñata in the newsroom, and yeah. I let's not go there because we don't want to trigger our listeners. But
Hmm.
yes, we were trained in in the worst version of the 1980s playground. So you had to survive, you had to fall and pick yourself up and do a ton of other things that were okay when we were in our 20s. But I am in my 50s now. I don't have that same resilience. My body doesn't process things in the same way. And the violence keeps on coming. Um, People are quiet until they break and they leave the profession. Today, a recent graduate from a journalism school in their first job will only allow themselves to last in the profession 3 years. They leave. They leave because they are not paid enough, because they're abused, because they are not subject to decent working conditions. And the bunch of us will say, oh, I've been 25 years in the profession and I still see all the harm. Yeah, because we allow ourselves, we've normalized it so much. So much. So, what do we see? We see the old guard finally slowly dying off, leaving the path for a new systemic change. And that's what really I am only interested in talking about, is how we are going to change this system. Because I want to be alive and I want people to continue in the profession. Because we're talking about the democracy and the pillar of our democracy. We cannot just say, let TikTok fix the whole situation.
Hmm.
Yes.
Okay, because one of the ways sometimes when I'm talking to people, especially about what Dom and I are doing, I'm like, okay, well, imagine if you have a house and the fourth wall of that house is just deteriorating, crumbling. So elements are blowing in and it's a mess and everything's a jumble. I'm like, that's kind of where we are. Journalism is part of the foundation of our democracy. And I personally feel as though that's something that's gotten lost for a lot of people or forgotten about. But how, I guess, does the work that you're doing help to underline for the public and the work, I guess, that Dom and I are trying to do, that the health of journalism is critical, essential to our democratic infrastructure? Oh, Louisa, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Lovely. Um, let's go back. I think that we need to, one, two, three. I think we need to talk more about our stories. I wrote a play. I wrote a play in 2023. I was a fellow at Stanford for a year, and I was asking myself, one of those design thinking questions. How might we bring more mental health to the newsroom? How might we bring more caring into the profession? And I talked to a ton of people. Actually, I talked to 100 people. That's a ton over a year. And I asked them a few questions. Most of the answers that I would get when I would ask people, but do you need mental health support? Do you need care? And I would use my caring voice. How can I help you feel better? And most people would send me off packing. They would tell me to bugger off, and I'm using very PC words. They would tell me to go, find, find the road that never leads to them. And they would say, I'm okay. Leave me alone. What I want is money. Um, and so what I did was to write monologues about these rants. And it's called A Human Condition. It's a play about journalism, and I perform these monologues in front of audiences. I've performed them in newsrooms. I've performed them in bars around the world, like Berlin and Romania, in Taiwan. Like I've performed this thing around the world. And what I see when the performance is done is exactly the answer to what you're asking. People go, oh, I had no idea. I didn't know it was so hard to be a journalist. I don't understand why people treat you so bad. I'm so sorry you're hurting so much. What can I do to help you? And from the journalism perspective, people sob, they cry their faces off And I remember a friend that I adore. He's been covering the border, the US-Mexico border for more than 35 years, Dudley Althouse. He says, I feel seen for the first time in my life. Thank you. So we are going to have to tell people what it's like. We're going to have to tell people how the sausage is made. We're going to have to tell people these are our scars. This is what
Hmm.
it looks like. This is the bump from holding the camera. This
Y-
is the thing. This is my carpal tunnel. This is my sciatica. This is why I don't sleep. This is why. This is why I used to drink. This is why I smoke. This is why. This is why. This is why. It's the only way people are going to take us seriously. We need to take the veneer off.
Yeah, yeah, it's not just about the finished product.
Mm-mm.
The getting there is the journey. When you talk, though, about journalists telling you, I feel seen, I'm wondering how, from the work that you've done, have you come to understand how things like gender and race complicate what it's like to feel seen as a journalist? Because I'll be honest, a lot of the things that I'm seeing happening in American media right now as a Black woman, um, it is underlining some deep problems in our country. The fact that I'm seeing so many journalists of color just get cut left and right.
Shout out to the crowd of CBS this week
Hmm.
and very specific targeting of people of color as the layoffs and people who are uh, more aligned to a certain uh, version of what journalism should look like stay.
Hmm.
And I'm not belittling them. I don't know them. I don't know anybody, and I don't know what their careers are, but the optics are awful. Um, Listen, I was born in Mexico City. I'm Mexican born, Latina. And I always juggle with this question of to be seen sometimes makes the work slower because we have to explain a ton. Um, Sometimes going under the radar makes you more efficient. You're able to do your thing. Don't mind me. I'm just gonna do whatever, put the check in the mail. I'm fine. However, I don't think we can allow ourselves in this age of hyper surveillance and of hyper social presence. We cannot be unseen. And the second that the we are speaking on Zoom, and the second that the little camera shows my name and shows my face, you are already making decisions about what is coming out of my mouth. It is absolutely impossible for us to detach ourselves from the stereotype. It's impossible for us to detach ourselves from the racism, and it is impossible to detach ourselves from the sexism and everything ism that is. Um, I would not claim to know what it's like to walk in your shoes at all. But what I can say is that I use it to my advantage every single day. I lean on it a ton. Uh, and this current administration is making my leaning in more dangerous. So I need to
Hmm.
be more deliberate. I need to be more poised, but I'm not. I'm not going quiet about this. I am not being quiet at all. I haven't spoken Spanish yet. I used to do that more often. I used to be far more in your face with a lot of different things. I think that the current administration is definitely make us censor ourselves. Uh, but we need to be deliberate. It is part of the mask that we wear to be able to be professionally out there. The masks, our masks are
Yeah,
racialized, are genderized, yeah.
I guess part of what also makes me really wonder, and asking this to you as a Mexican-born journalist working in America, is with, the current administration's fixation on deportations of just what sometimes feels like all things Latina or Latino. How I know for myself, there was been a lot of discussion amongst other journalists of color about what it was like, especially at the height of like, right after the George Floyd murder and having covered all of these stories and how it's a different level of cuts as you're watching people either miss some of the nuance that goes into, why these stories are racialized or not fully humanizing victims and how these all could be members of our own family who, some of us are there having to cover the body, etc. And that is a trauma, I think, for anybody, but it feels a little bit different when the structure of media is led largely by cisgendered white men, um, dictating how we tell stories about other communities that they are not part of. It's just, it's a unique kind of wear and tear, emotional wear and tear of dealing with that. And so I would have to imagine that for so many Latino journalists, and I understand that some divisions, some news outlets are even cutting their bilingual departments completely. That's gotta be like, that's just, there's just a unique devastation that's happening there.
I'm thinking of a couple of things, and I appreciate your honesty. I have to think a lot when I hear what you're saying
Hmm.
because there's a lot of big no-nos, and one of the biggest no-no, and well, let's put it out there. There is a very complicated relationship between the Latino and the African American community.
Yeah.
There's a very complicated history of misunderstandings, ships
Hmm.
passing in the night, and also the extreme racism in our communities, the colorism, and especially from my own, Mexicans are extremely racist. We are very racist to our own. We're colorist against our indigenous people. We are classist to the core. There's even a term called whitexican. Did you know that? So there are
No.
No.
whitexicans as well as Mexicans. And so the whitexican is who you see in the novellas, is the people who you see are directing movies. They're doing this and that, even though I mean I adore my directors, I adore a lot of people, but I will say that from the perspective that I know, racism is embedded in our culture
Hmm.
and it relates to the way we see the world. Now, forward into LA, fast forward into Chicago, fast forward into the border politics, even Fresno. We have always been pitted against each other and we're not minorities in this country as other groups, but we're called minorities. I don't even know why. Um, and that relationship is sad, is a lot of misunderstanding, and it is abused and it's used by, very, very nasty people to control us through hate, to control us through opposing values, to control us through making us compete against each other for jobs, for grants, for scholarships, for help, for
Hmm.
aid. Um, in the Olympics of discrimination, nobody wins. Nobody wins. And it's understood that, Jim Crow, it's understood that harm against African American people is paramount. It's beyond understanding. Uh, why do we have to rate the suffering of folks, being arrested by ICE as we speak? I cannot. Everybody has been suffering, and I I have no words. Your skin crawls. My skin crawls. I cannot look at my Instagram
Mm.
because I have Ugg boots, and people being arrested by the migra. How can you do that? Well, that's what I get on my social media. So no, I'm not, I haven't been on social media a ton because it's just entering my brain. Sorry, this was very long-winded, but I needed to explain. It's not as simple, and it's extremely sad.
I mean, and it is, and there's what surprised you most, Louisa, about what people say they needed to actually, journalists who say they've needed to heal. What do you find through your research, through the talking, like, what is it that they need to heal in terms of what the trauma, all the excuses they've experienced? What is it that they need to move on and also still be able to do, I mean, want to still be able to do your job? Because I have to believe most people, listen, we've all, I know I've had my experiences, Jenna, you, we've all had experiences in terms of, but what is it you want to continue to do? Because many of us love what we do and we want to share the stories. That's the whole thing, the diversity of the stories that we hear that you wouldn't get if everybody sort of drops off. Like, but you need to heal also. And I think oftentimes people just don't because you don't have the time to. There isn't, you feel there's a weakness in saying that you need to heal or that there is something wrong. So, what is it that you're hearing that people need to heal from?
I would say that there are, I would say that there's two things that people want to heal, but they're not connected. And that is also a very interesting spot. People want to be able to heal from grind culture. Yes. So people need the luxury of free time, the luxury of a Sunday respite. Like when was the last time that people had a Sunday, to walk around and smell the roses or I don't know, cook roast and eat it with your family. The luxury of free time. And especially I mean, I think that most of the journalists operating in the United States now, if not half, are freelancers because of the way in which corporations are now saving saving money to accrue and pay their investors or whatever it is. What they do is that they cut contracts, they cut services provided to employees by just having people, hired by the hour as freelancers. So the luxury of having a paid vacation or the luxury of having training or retraining disappears when you don't have a structure that is actually supporting you, let alone have a fixed editor or program that enhances your mental health. If you don't have a structure around you and you don't even have health insurance, how are you going to provide for services for yourself? So bam, people want affordable free services provided by people who are culturally aware of who they are. The number of times one needs to explain a person who is providing mental health support about the fact that this is not our first language. And so there are a few things that are going to come out weird because we have to explain a ton of things because they don't understand I don't know what the immigrant experience is, or they don't understand what, living and walking in our shoes is. So that's one. We want to be able to have services, affordable, accessible, culturally appropriate, etc., etc., etc. And at the same time, people are hand in hand organizing the largest resistance in the universe as we speak. And it has nothing to do with politics, and it has nothing to do who's occupying, government, and it has nothing to do with journalism as a profession. We are basically organizing a resistance against artificial intelligence. The biggest and the largest threat to our existence is AI.
Mm.
Yes. So what do people want? They want to retrain. They want to reskill. They want to what is the word? There's another word that's technical and I love it. It's upscale, reskill.
Upgrade, I'm not
Upgrade,
sure.
uplift.
Yes.
People want to uplift
Mm-hmm.
their humanity. We are being replaced by robots. By robots. There's nothing we are going to be able to do. Forget about your mental health or your empathy. The machine is already there.
Mm-hmm.
There was this fellow. He was applying he was doing applied research on LinkedIn. And he sent his resume to a ton of openings on LinkedIn, which is what a lot of our listeners are doing as we speak. Maybe
Uh-huh.
they're listening to us as they're filling up the forms that are already online. This person put the recipe for the hamburger helper in the middle of his bio. So he puts his bio, and in the middle he puts, and to make a hamburger helper, you need a kilo, da 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 da, and then you need the onions and blah. He sent it over. He got the answer back from the bots. He got the hamburger helper back from the bots. His research is trying to prove that nobody is watching.
Hmm.
Nobody's keeping tabs. Dear robot who is in the call with us, because there's always a robot in the call with us,
Oh
is not
Hmm.
yeah.
paying attention because you don't know. So that's what people want. People want services, and at the same time, people are organizing. And I know I'm using Star Wars references. I know, Dom, we have that in common. The resistance
Yes.
is real, and the
Yeah.
resistance is human.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, my camera now moves on her own. I don't even know what she's doing. She's just deciding.
You know, it's I saw a friend recently and she was telling me about a job that she had applied for. She saw on LinkedIn and she applied for the job, but she reached out to them directly anyway. She reached out and she was surprised. She got in touch with the manager for that place and they called her in right away for an interview. She got the job. And then 2 weeks later, she got an email saying, sorry, from the same organization saying, sorry, we're going to have to pass this time. We're not, yes, exactly. You just, we filled the position with someone else. And she was like, she showed it to them. I was like, guys, what is up with this? They like, but I think that is to
It's a
say that I
bot.
think it's exactly. And that's so much I think of organizations rely on AI in terms of even looking for employment that it's really become it shows you again, just like, listen, there are great aspects to it, but it does take a toll on how we all also treat one another too, because of there is less emotion attached with when you're talking about
There's
like we do
no
lose
emotion
there's
attached.
exact well we lose but we become stunted too, and that's part of the job too. That's why even like writing wise or however we use AI, it does, and there are great aspects to it, but it does take a toll, a human toll on us, how we interact with it.
Tom, it's dangerous. Let me tell you a quick story. And we are also writing as we speak. We're writing a paper with my colleague Ana Reagada because our work is based on a helpline. Like we have a helpline, Vita Activa has a helpline, and it's open as we speak. And we provide free mental health support to journalists and activists as we speak.
Hmm.
And I hope we can put in the materials accompanying this podcast
Oh, absolutely.
access to the reference to Vita Activa. Um, the month of June, we started seeing our users escalate. And we thought, oh, we must be doing something good because there's a lot of users. And in July, they doubled. And in August, they tripled. And in September, we were receiving a 3,000 fold cases in our helpline. Some days I would open the helpline and there will be 100 live cases of people screaming. There were teens and they were all suicidal.
Wow.
Our helpline is not trained for teens and it's not trained for suicidal cases and it's not trained for any of that. Our research is going to tell you how we found out who they were, why they were there, and how they arrived to us. The interesting thing is when we ask people, how did you find out about us? What do you think their answer was?
Chat. They went to chat. They were looking for mental health resources, and you came up through chat.
When the iteration of suicide was mentioned.
Oh.
AI is very useful to identify its limits. And when the limits are touched is when the humans come in.
Mm.
Now, I'm very serious about this. And we are very, very scared because I've told you I've professed my love and admiration for the younger generations, the Gen Zs and the alphas and all the beautiful people who are coming in with a different set. of tools in their brains. However, the absolute blind love for everything that's bits and bots, is problematic. It is not your friend. It doesn't have a soul. It's designed to get money from you
Mm.
by means of time, by means of interaction, by means of whatever it is that you're giving as data. But it is also putting you in danger. We do not know exactly what the effect of those conversations have in young minds. What we know is that people are increasingly more distressed. If you think that the chatbot is a good ally, is a good friend, I would just invite you tonight to just go to the coffee shop, go to the bar, go to the library, go wherever it is that you go, and just talk to a human person and say, you know what, I'm not doing very, very good. And you'll feel what the power of human interaction is,
Hmm.
human conversation. I will love to share with you when the survey when the research is done,
Oh
because we are
yeah.
finding really distressing things. And this is beyond sad. This is scary. We are in danger.
Hmm.
And nobody seems to want to wake up from the daze.
Well, let me ask this question because listening to everything that you're saying and the at the same time, as we've already touched on, media is being consolidated by some of the same individuals and sources and companies that are also very heavily invested in AI and, like let a robot do it or something else like that. I'm wondering, as a professional, is there any reason that we can come to understand why the industry of news media, of journalism, has been so resistant to acknowledging the emotional labor? If journalists talk to each other, we can all definitely come to a conclusion and agree that, yeah, there is a heavy emotional labor that comes with this, but I, I can't even fathom a workplace taking that seriously. There are some that I do know that have done things like, brought in puppies or something after like a serious crisis in a community, but that's the exception to the rule.
I I don't mean to sound uh like a different person right now, but sometimes I kind of shift and my
Huh.
energy shifts. And I would say this. The reckoning is coming. Winter is coming. And winter is coming to all of those organizations who didn't understand that the basic component of their money-making machine was actually humans. The sausage was made by humans. Soil and green is people. Soil and green is people. Journalism is people.
Hmm.
It is not cameras. It is not microphones. It is not even words. It's people. And it talks about people. And it's people talking about people. That is journalism per se. So the more we forget that the structure of this machine is humanoids, the further we move away from surviving as a society. I cannot stress enough how much I come from the future. I come from
Mm.
Latin America. Go take a look at Venezuela. Go take a look at El Salvador. Go take a look at Nicaragua and see what happens when you murder the media.
Mm.
And see what happens when there's no place for you to find what the weather is going to be like. I have respected colleagues who in Caracas, as we speak, go on buses with a cardboard cutout of a TV and they put it on and they put their faces through and they read the news on the bus so that
Wow.
people can find out what the weather is like, what is the exchange rate with the dollar, and what is the latest, situation in Gaza or whatever happened
Hmm.
in DC.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is no way of having access to trusted information. I know people in Utah for whom there's only one journalist for 100,000 people per capita. People who don't even know what the price of grains are, and they're farmers. People who don't know what's going to happen with the tornado. People who don't even believe alert systems because they're being completely manipulated. So I come from the future, and the future is that I need news to survive. I don't think there is any other more beautiful way of putting it. This is a fight for survival as a society. So, if you know what's good for you, buy a cup of coffee for your journalist. Give them a hug. Bring the puppies in. But also, if you're going to if you have a question between bringing the puppies and paying people more, use that money to pay them a little more.
Hmm.
Don't
Yeah.
fire
Hmm.
them. Train them. Don't mess with us. Don't minimize. Caring is a social construct. It requires systemic planning.
And I think, honestly, Louise, I feel like a lot of these companies could afford to handle paying their journalists more and
Pay the
also giving
puppies.
care. I think you could do, I think a lot of them, we know they can do it. They have the money to do it. It's a question of, do they want to do that? Because for them also, it's like, this is, again, our society today, even more so than it has ever been, is all about money. And we see the thousands of people who are laid off in the media industry. And because it's cheaper, but to produce content. But we really did want to get into you talking to us a little bit about what inspired you to launch the Media Resilience Network and how you see it serving, working with journalists down the road.
You know what? Let me say that again. You know what? The inspiration is just opening the window and looking out at what is happening outside. Our colleagues, our friends, our beloved friends, allies who are suffering, people who haven't had care for decades, people who have just now discovered the power of, my God, therapy, trauma-informed care, post-traumatic stress disorder treatment, MDMR. There's so many amazing technologies that help people process gruesome details and the gruesome details of our jobs. Because being a journalist is never too sexy. It's kind of intense. And most oftentimes, yes, it is traumatic by nature, but it doesn't have to be done by traumatized individuals. I'm going to say that again.
Yes, please. One more
Journalism,
time.
yes. Journalism is a traumatic endeavor. Again, journalism is a traumatic endeavor, but it should not be made by traumatized individuals.
Mm.
That is the origin of the Media Resilience Network, or as we like to call it, MotherNet. MotherNet is an integrated system. And we are launching, yes, free counseling and care, FREE, for underrepresented and underserved communities and everybody who needs them. Training, upskilling, uplifting, reskilling, relifting, and also in-person interventions. We're going to travel the country. We're just
Mm.
going to go if you need us. If you need us in South Dakota, we will come. If you need us in Florida, we will come. If you need us in Queens, absolutely, and we'll have great food. We just want to go meet folks where they are, where they're at, and bring the training that they have asked us. They're answering a survey as we speak. And people want repackaging their skill sets to work as journalists in other professions. How can I be a journalist and also, offer my services in different spaces and not feel guilty about it? how to relaunch my solo career, how to navigate, the challenges
Mm-hmm.
of this space, and also how to be safe as a result of all that.
All right. Well, with that note, which I love everything that I just heard and everything that I did not realize I was missing as I was building my career. We always ask all of our guests at the end of our conversation is what was it that drew you to journalism? Why did you choose this as a career path?
Um, it was love. I fell in love, not with journalism. I fell in love with a man, and he trained as a journalist. He's actually a recovering journalist. And I married this man. And I had no job. I was an academic. I couldn't find, well, and shout out to everybody who used to be an academic. So I couldn't find work, couldn't teach anywhere. And somebody in a bar asked if they knew someone who had a good voice and could speak English the way I do. And that person was Lourdes Garcia Navarro. And she hired me as her producer in NPR in Mexico City and taught me the ropes. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for NPR, for public media, for Lulu, and then for a ton of different people who made me a journalist at the age of 35. I started late. And, the story is still unfolding.
I love that. And shout out to public media as that's all that's my heart will always be with, even with all of the challenges that it is dealing with right now. Shout out to public media.
They're a big school. NPR is the biggest school. We're all very grateful.
Absolutely.
University of News.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, with that, Louisa, I want to thank you so very much for
Thanks,
not
Luisa.
only the work that you're doing, which again, I think as Dom and I are listening, we're just like, I didn't even realize that wound was there. But for making sure that going forward, that as we rebuild the news media, whatever it becomes, that it is something that is shored up with the understanding that this is people. It's not dollars, it's people. I feel like that's the most radical thing that I've heard in a long time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Luisa.
Thank you all. Thank you very, very much. And good luck and happy journalism life.
I love that. All right. All right, bye. Laid Off and Looking is an independent podcast conceived of and created by Jenna Flanagan and Dominic Camia.
Music provided by Jake Howitt. Research by Lori Rothenbucker.
You can watch and follow us on YouTube.
Or you can listen and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you have any questions or suggestions, we want to hear from you. So leave a comment.
We do check them.
Or reach out to us anytime at laidofandlookingpod@gmail.com.
New episodes every Friday.